I'm Marika from My Creative Quilts, and this is part 5 of our double Irish chain sew along quilt along. There's been a bit of a time lag between part 4 and part 5. That's because the pandemic hit and I got busy. I ended up making a lot of masks for our community. I donated them, and in exchange I just asked people to give to our local food bank, and the response was overwhelming. The food bank got a really nice donation from the community, anywhere from $5 to $100 depending on who donated. And I'm just thrilled. I just didn't expect it to take over my life as much as it did. But anyway, we're back to quilting again, and we're back to part 5 of the sew along. So the quilt top is done. It's on my frame. I'm going to show it to you. You can do the quilting by hand, by machine, by sewing machine, or with the quilt machine. The reason I'm using my long arm machine is because it's so big and it's going to take a long time. I have done a king size quilt on my sewing machine. It is possible. The things that you keep in mind for the differences is when you're using your sewing machine, you need to baste it well. The way you baste is entirely up to you. I have used spray baste. I have done pins. I have done sewing. I've used board basting. I can show you a link for that one as well. But that's one reason why I love my long arm so much. I don't have to baste my quilt. So if you're going to use a machine, you have to make sure you baste it well. The bigger the quilt, the harder it can be, but it's worth it. The better you baste it, the better the outcome will be. When I used my machine for quilting, I had a big frame, a big PVC frame that you could, with clamps that you can hook up over your table, and that took the weight of the quilt off, because that's part of the problem when you're sewing on the machine. There's a lot of drag. So you can look into that. There are different kinds of frames and different things you can do. When I first started machine quilting seriously, I was using my daughter's bedroom. She had moved out but left her bed, and she had a loft bed, and my sewing machine was underneath the loft bed, and I was able to hang clamps from the springs of her bed, and that worked out really well too. I didn't have any excess furniture. There are ways that you can accomplish this. So I'm going to be showing you on the long arm, but pretty well everything I do there can be done on the machine, except you're doing from the middle out. That's the one big difference between the two. When I use my long arm, I'm doing from the top down. For the regular sewing machine, you're doing from the middle out. So you really need to know ahead of time what you're going to do. So you need to stop and think, how do I want to quilt this? You can do it on the fly. I have done quilts where I wasn't sure what I was going to do until I got to that part. But because you're moving the quilt so much and you're not seeing the other parts of the quilt, it can be hard to remember what you did on a certain type of block. In that case, if you're doing quilting that you don't know ahead of time, you're just doing it on a whim, I suggest taking a picture of the block when you're finished it, so that when you get to the same block later on, you can look at the picture and see how you quilted it. What I find with my long arm is if I'm doing a lot of quilting, specialized quilting in the borders at the top, by the time I get down to the bottom, I've forgotten what I've done. So I will draw on a piece of paper what I've done with measurements, and I will also take a photo if I remember to do it. And that saves me a lot of grief. When I first started with my long arming, I would get to the bottom, I'd have to roll all the way back to the top again to see what I had done, and that got a little frustrating. So anyway, that's enough about preparation. Let me show you what I've done and some suggestions of what you might do. Here's a photo that I took of the quilt before I put it on the frame. So you can see the block here. Okay, this is the focus fabric, and these are my little blocks. So one thing you can do is print out some images of your quilt and draw on the paper the design that you think you might want to do. Okay, that's one thing you can do. That's why I printed that out. This is the blocked part. Okay, it needs to be trimmed, but you can see how it turned out well, and you can see the seams. They're all pressed in different directions. If you have a lot of seams, sometimes you can't get your quarter seams in the corner so nicely. You can take out a couple of stitches, not down to the bottom, just a couple of stitches, and you can open it up and make a little bit of a checkerboard there. It takes a little bit of the bulk out. But anyway, so that's one. So we can think about what we want to do with this quilt. There are a few things we can do. I can do X right through it. I can do little curvy things through it. I can do like a floral thing. There are a lot of options. So I'm not sure what I want to do at this point. There are a lot of lines in the quilt. Usually when I have a lot of lines, I like to do curves in my quilting to soften the corners and the lines. On the other hand, it's very busy fabric. So traditionally with a double Irish chain or any kind of Irish chain, these are usually very bland. These are like white, off-white, like a light color. And usually these are the busy blocks. So this is a great place when you're using a plain fabric to show off really great quilting. You can do all sorts of designs, medallions, whatever you want to do. The problem is with the busy fabric like this, you won't see that. I could put as much effort as I want to beautiful quilting, but you're not really going to see it. So you're going to lose it in the depth of the fabric. So this is going to call for simple quilting. I might do something a little more intricate in these blocks, but this is definitely going to be simple. So I might do curves around the corners. I might do just like a flower around it. I'm not sure yet. I'm still thinking about that. But these are the kinds of things you need to think of before you start quilting. You don't have to know exactly what you're going to do if you don't want to. Like I've said before, I've done some quilts on the fly. It's like, okay, this will look good here, this will look good there. But when you're doing something big like this, especially if it's for somebody else, you do need to have a plan. So what are you going to do? You look at it, you study it. I often will look at a quilt for several weeks before I decide how it needs to be quilted. People laugh at me, but I say the quilts talk to me. They tell me. If I force it, if I push it, the quilting tends not to be as nice. So you don't have to quilt it right away. You finished a quilt top, just let it percolate in your brain a little bit. And then all of a sudden the right idea will come and the quilting will look really nice. So here's the quilt on the frame. It's a king size quilt. I only have an 8-foot frame. That's all I could fit in this room. So I got creative and I folded up the edge over here and the edge over here. And I'll quilt all the middle first, and then I'll reload it. I'll take it off, reload it, and do the sides. It'll work. I have confidence. So you can see here that I did a miter border. Okay, don't say you can't do a miter border. You can. It's very easy. The recording I did just before this one is how to do a miter border, and you'll see it really is very easy. It's a lot easier than it seems. You just need to be exact. This is one area where you do need to be exact. So that's there. So now, how am I going to quilt this thing? Let's see. What you can do is get a piece of clear fabric, plastic. Okay, it's just, I got this at the either the dollar store or Staples or something like that. And you can put it over your quilt. And then, just using a marker, you decide what you want to do, right? Do I maybe want to do this? Or do I maybe want to do this? Or this? You just play around with it. Do I just want to do X's maybe? Maybe I just want to do a crosshatch on this. And you just play with it until you come up with something that you like. Okay? You erase it and you use it again the next time. One word of warning, if you're using a permanent marker around your quilt, be very careful that you always put the cap on it the minute it's not on the plastic. I speak from experience. Okay, so that is the plastic. So that's what you're going to do there. I decided to use my ruler to make these curves. I don't know if you can see them. I'm going to try to see if you can see them. Okay. And this is where I say, to take a picture and make notes, because I'm using the different lines. And when I get to the bottom, I can guarantee you I won't remember which line on the ruler I used. So that's how I do that. Okay. So I'm not sure what the best thing is to do for quilting on this. I really don't. I'm just working on the border right now. And then once I've gotten the border done, I might have a better idea of how it's going to work. And so this is part 5 of our Quilt Along Sew Along. So if you're making a double Irish chain or any kind of Irish chain, think about how you might want to quilt it. What do you think would be a good use of your thread and time? And so for part 6, when we meet again, I will have the quilting in progress and I will show you how it's going. See you next time.